the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Chisholm. Here. Richard. Here. Carlson. Here. Luce. Here. Bergen.
Here.
Hadley. Here. Johnson. Here.
Approval of the agenda. Okay. Any discussion? Roll call.
Chisholm.
Aye.
Carlson.
Aye.
Luce. Aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Richard.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Bergen.
Aye. Are there any public comments for anything other than what are on the agenda? Anybody have any? Seeing none. Consent agenda.
Consent agenda consists of minutes of the May 6, May 10, 2019 meetings, claims, renewal Class C beer permit for Copland Goliath, including Sunday sales and outdoor service areas, extended outdoor service area for Copland Goliath for June 21 to 23 event, Resolution 2957 approving fiscal 19 transfers, consider C3 commercial design review, 120 Washington Street, Lorana Bistro, remove and replace their awning. Resolution 2958, a resolution to provide for a notice of hearing on proposed plans and specifications, formal contract, the estimated total cost of the public improvement, and award of contract therefore for the Oneota Drive Bridge reconstruction, Iowa DOT letting for the hearing on June 3rd, 2019, 5:45 p.m. Resolution 2961, resolution acknowledging receipt of application in the vicinity of the Downing Commercial Subdivision for voluntary annexation and authorizing the city to proceed as specified, Chapter 368 of the Iowa Code. Resolution 2962, a resolution acknowledging receipt of application in the vicinity of the Decorah Business Park for voluntary annexation, authorizing the city to proceed as specified in Chapter 368 Code of Iowa. I would like to read a little history and background on the annexation, if that's all right, before the council considers approval of the two resolutions regarding annexation. I do have a handout here, but I'm just going to kind of go through this and provide a little bit of the background. Resolution 2961, voluntary annexation on the Downing Commercial Subdivision, covers the fourth of 4 annexation areas initiated in an annexation plan that began in 2010 as work was being developed for water and sewer improvements east along Highway 9, culminating with the connection to the elevated water storage tank in the business park. That storage tank was built in approximately 2008-2009. The water and sewer improvements were completed in 2013 with annexation number 1, completed in August 2015 for the larger residential area. Annexations 2 and 3 completed in November 2015 for the commercial area around the Rockweiler Appliance area, residential number 2 area in the Scenic View Estates, and number 3, High Point East subdivision new eastern area. Annexation number 4, which is here tonight, includes commercial property along 172nd Street around the Mississippi Welders and Barn Critters area. Water and sewer lines were completed in 2014. Paving, curb, and gutter along 172nd Street were completed about the same time. All public services and infrastructure were completed by 2015. This annexation process includes voluntary petitions of annexation of properties with legal descriptions as noted on the agenda in the background notes, but commonly referred to as Dolphin Gymnastics Dance Studio, Mississippi Welders Supply, Dr. Merrill Girarni, veterinarian of Barn Critters, Kirshner Collision, C Electric, and some property owned by Steve Downing Development Company. There is one parcel that would be non-consenting property owner, GKCK LLC, otherwise known as Pencil Oil and LP. On the second resolution, 2962, that's application for voluntary annexation adjacent to the business park for land owned by Decorah Jobs Incorporated. This action receives that annexation application and includes their property. The property was recently purchased by Decorah Jobs. They have petitioned for this annexation and intend for this land to become part of an expansion of the Decorah Business Park. This annexation also includes land of a non-consenting property owner, A.B. Hansen Company LLC, otherwise known as Lane's Dairy. And the reason for both of these is that with the voluntary annexations, the non-consenting creates an island, which is not allowed under state law. So, that's an overview of the history and background, at least on the larger one along Highway 9. So, this is on the consent agenda because it's fairly simple in nature. Otherwise, you're just simply receiving the applications, authorizing the staff to begin the annexation process, which will include consultation with the county, township trustees, and mailing certified notices to the property.
An island being a highly specific term regarding one property that wouldn't be part of the city if it wasn't included in
Surrounded by the city, right?
Thank you.
I have a motion for accepting the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Discussion. Any other discussion on this? Roll call?
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Chisholm?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
Okay, conduct a public hearing on proposed zoning code amendments, chapter 17.44.010. Excuse me, procedures for applications for rezoning real estate in the city of Decorah. Do you want to give a little bit of background before we open that up, Chad?
So this is an item that the mayor has put forth to the Planning and Zoning Commission with some conversation with the city council, at least at one council table discussion and a work session sometime back. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my notes here on this one too. The main premise of the proposed changes in regard to how the city council responds to a recommended denial of a rezoning request brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Current zoning code provides for the city council to consider a recommendation of denial from the commission, and if it finds it favorable to overturn the commission's findings, the council would need a 3/4 or 6 of 7 councilpersons majority vote to approve the zoning amendment application. The offered proposal here tonight changes the council's threshold for approval of a commission-denied application to 2/3 or 5 of 7 majority vote of the council to overturn the commission. Planning and Zoning Commission did hear a public hearing on this matter. Minutes are in the council packet. The commission voted to recommend approval of the ordinance amended as presented. There have been no written comments received.
Okay. And I had worked with John early on as far as the state code is concerned, where there's no longer state code. So I'll open the public hearing. Anybody who's wished to speak, come to the microphone, state your name and address.
My name is Lee Zook, I live at 300.
Pull it up just a little bit. There we go.
Is that better?
I think so.
Is this on?
Yeah.
300 and a half
Thank you.
West Water Street. I'm here today to speak in favor of keeping the city code as it stands at the present time. I don't think I want to go into a lot of background. I think the details have been relatively well reported in the press. There seems to be a piece of property that is in question, and the zoning commission has at one point in time denied rezoning that, and they may have to look at that again. I'm assuming that if they've done their homework the first time, it won't be as difficult to do the second time as the first time. Changing the rules in terms of making it easier for the city council, for this body to override the commission is, I think, unfortunate. because the rules were in all probability established to make it difficult to do so very purposefully when the code was written. And I see no reason why that should change at the present time. Obviously, the issue has to do with development of commercial properties. And if there were no other commercial properties available in Decorah to develop, I think this would be a possibly different situation. But I think in terms of building in a floodplain, the zoning commission has been very clear about what their thinking is in regards to that matter, and I would hope that the council would back them in the future if they need to vote on that again. Thank you.
Yeah. Just, I know that when I brought this up was the current piece that has been coming, is going to be coming up, or has been coming up, was not on the table. I felt that giving more leeway to the city council would be advantageous, but also be respectful of the planning. But I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much. Anyone else?
My name is Tony Larson. I live at 502 East Broadway here in Decorah. And 45 years ago, I sat up where you folks are sitting. So I know a little bit about it. But what I'm concerned about is this rezoning. It's a four-member board. They're not elected by the people.
It's actually
They're
a
appointed.
it's a seven-member board for the planning and zoning.
Planning, I'm sorry, 7.
Okay,
But they're not elected by the people.
no, they're appointed.
You folks are all elected by the people, and I think that when you have a chance to go over everything, and when they bring you a recommendation, I think that if 4 people vote against it, that should be carried. Everything else is handled 4 and 3. Anything you do, it goes by majority, 4 and 3, except this. And I can't see any reason why that can't be changed. I think you people are elected by all your constituents in your ward, and you're at large. I served in Ward 1, I served at large. And I think that you should really take a sharp look at that, because if it's going to get carried away, I'm afraid, if it isn't. Now, I could go on about some other things if I got a minute.
I'll give you a minute.
Okay, I'll speak fast.
Or come back again, it's nice to see you.
Anyway, when we served, we did the sewer plant, we did the bridge over here and the 4-lane over by Chevy Drive there. We did Montgomery Street, and we did a lot of things. Then I took a job transfer in 1991, so I left Decorah. As before I left, we passed a 1-cent sales tax for the school, we passed a 1-cent sales tax for streets, and it just isn't, the streets just aren't getting done. This week in the Decorah paper, I cut it out because I couldn't believe it. In 1989, the council had a contract, and I was still on the council at that time, $379,000. Now we got this 1-cent sales tax that we brought in over $800,000. And you had this much that you could put in before, so that's over $1,200,000. So where is all this money going? The streets are horrible in Decorah. And it's just, you're ashamed to have people come to town because they think they're going to be on a gravel road. Thank you for the minute.
You're welcome, and I hope you come back again.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak to the public?
My name is Sharon Del Vento. I live at 206 Rural Avenue. I understand the need to open up things to development for business. I understand that the city needs income from this sort of thing. I personally do not think it is wise to turn a floodplain into any kind of commercial thing, because you don't eliminate the water, you just shove it down, whether it's shoved into someone's farmland or shoved into someone's basement. I think it should be extremely difficult. I think it should be illegal completely to rezone a floodplain into commercial, ever. And I understand the person who bought it is going to be looking at a loss, obviously, but someone who buys a swamp deserves what he gets. I mean, if he buys something that is a floodplain, thinking he's going to make a really hefty profit by selling it to some corporation that does not care about the neighbors down the road who will be flooded out, because that water has got to go somewhere. I mean, anybody who took high school physics understands that the water has to go somewhere. And I don't know that the climate issues are going to be any easier in the next 10, 20 years than they are now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Bob Naisland. I live at 216 Riverview Drive. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an attorney, but I did chair the zoning board through the whole Walmart issue. This is nothing compared to that in terms of motion. But I'm not in favor of the change. 75%, and it's 6 because we have 7 board members. I don't think we're going to change that, but if it does, the numbers would change. It's a percentage, not just the numbers. But my feeling is we have a checks and balance system. And when the zoning board makes decisions, there are people you have appointed. And if you can more easily override their decisions, then you're placing mistrust in people that you have appointed. The board, the zoning board, there's a lot of study. They do the preliminary work. They're supposed to have studied the issue. They're not perfect. But city councils aren't perfect either. City council made a poor decision on the Walmart. They granted permission to put fill in a floodplain. And the city council wasn't provided it was allowed to do that. It was the Board of Adjustment. And we went to the state Supreme Court, and that's what their decision. The fill was illegal. That floodplain, I think FY is the strongest zone there is. It supersedes all. That's what we were led to understand back then. And you can't just change it by votes. It has to be done by science. It has to be done by fill. You've got wherever the floodplain is determined to be, through science and through statistics and study, you cannot change that by voting. You have to raise that. It's all about elevation. You've got to get that floodplain higher by filling or putting stilts. You can build Menards on stilts. But you've got to get the floor of any development out there, by our code, 2 feet above what the 100-year floodplain level is. Nobody's going to be stupid to build on that floodplain right now without the fill. The Board of Adjustment should have been involved in this process a long time ago. There were 3 bodies that were going to give us information and help you and help the Planning Commission. The Army Corps of Engineers, the Department of Natural Resources, and our own Board of Adjustment. Those people, those first 2 commissions, do not live in the community. They can. But the Board of Adjustment are people who live in the city limits here and are appointed again by you. They live in this city. And there's this thing about the overall good. And the overall good could be that if we had a development out there that would bring tax dollars in, that could serve a great good for this community, and maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's worth putting fill there and having that. But I think we're kind of doing a knee-jerk operation because we were really disappointed as a community when one development didn't work. But I don't think this change of one vote to override the 4-3 vote that the Planning and Zoning Commission made is the right way to go. The right way to go would go to the Board of Adjustment, get permission to put fill, if they granted it, they're your commission, they're our commission as a city. Get the right and get permission to put the fill. Once the fill's there, I don't see how you can deny it. But you can't just, I don't think you just rezone floodplain to something else on votes. We're not talking about floodplain, we're talking about procedure here, but we all know that it's the Menards thing that motivated this whole discussion. And so we're gonna be looking down the road at another decision on zoning. I would have loved to see the Menards there personally. I think it was a good idea. I think it could have been done if we'd gotten permission from the Board of Adjustment to put the fill in, and then you could have acted. But you can only act on what you have, the information you have, and the situation you have. Until we raise that or elevate that floodplain with fill, I don't see how you can develop that. I don't have anything to say, well, I do, but I'm not gonna take your time now. But the 1 inch or whatever it is, that's not the issue, let's do it right. I'm interested in the procedure, getting it done right. And otherwise, we're gonna end up in court again. Now, the only thing that would reverse what happened then is if the judges were different. I think the Supreme Court voted 4-3 in favor of the plaintiffs at that time. That's a close vote too. And maybe you could take a chance on whatever you do could end up there for whatever legal. And I said I'm not a lawyer, but I served on that commission. I know the hard work that those commissioners do, and I think it gets back to your basic trust. I don't think a change in this one vote. I think 5 is probably fine. I'm not that opposed, but I think you got to be cautious. We have a checks and balance, and that's one of the ones. It should be difficult to overturn the commission's decision to deny. And thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in the public hearing?
My name is Mark Donahue, and I really hate to be on the other side of the fence from my former college
Can you
track
state
coach.
could you state your address?
Oh, my address, student, 807 Jefferson Street.
Thank you.
Decorah, Iowa. And yet, you made many good points. And for me, I think the Menard decision was probably the right decision. What it really comes down for me, and he makes some great points, we need to respect our committees. We need to respect the appointed committees. But I was an elected official at one time, and you folks are elected officials, and I just think that when the rubber hits the road, the elected officials should have a bit more power than the committees. And changing it to a 2/3 vote, I don't think it, maybe it doesn't really make a difference, and it may not, but I just think that, and I talked to Lorraine about this, I think there is a side of it that elected officials should have a bit more power than the power of appointed committees. And that's not disrespectful to appointed committees, it's just a philosophy of saying, you folks are elected officials, and if, in this case, we're saying 2/3 overturn something, I think that's the way it should be, and your constituents can let you know that, as they do on various other things. So I guess I'm going to say I'm here to support the change to 2/3, and that's not without great respect for people that say different than that, including my beloved college track coach.
Thank you.
You still lettered.
Only by you being benevolent.
Anyone else?
Hello, I'm Mark Jensen speaking on behalf of Winchester County Development. I actually am impressed with the broad cross-section of speaking tonight because it very much so reflects the interpretation of this decision tonight that we have seen as an organization, both for and against. And we have seen discussion that has been largely favored towards the concept of an elected official making a decision on behalf of an organization so the citizens have a voice. And we understand that while at this current point in time, the decision being made does greatly relate to what was the Menards decision on behalf of this community, it is not the only decision that may be impacted by this vote this evening. And so I would encourage us to make sure that we understand the impacts of this decision as a whole, as in all planning and zoning commission decisions going forward. There are many organizations and cities within the state of Iowa which use the Planning and Zoning Board as a reference to allow the city council to act rather than a vote. And there are many organizations that use a similar scenario as ours. And it is important for us to know that while we are in the immediacy of this decision that had happened, or was posing happened with the floodplain, that there are other zoning decisions that will be made within our community because we are landlocked and because we have a topography that allows us to have limited options for future development. And as we have goals as an economic development agency and as citizens of our community, our ability to fulfill those goals depends on our ability to provide opportunity for space, physical space, and many other things that way. So I hope that this evening you have that wherewithal to know that don't just base this decision off of that. A 5-2 vote does allow us an option to at least not pin it to one person, or 6 for that matter, but does put some check and balance back to the planning and zoning, because it can go either way. You can have a pro-development planning and zoning committee that can shove it on you and require a 6-1 vote out of it. So do understand that that can play to the city council's favor and the planning and zoning's favor in either way when you have such a lopsided veto per se or a vote against. So we as an organization are in support of the 5-2 this evening, and I think it is something that will continue to develop as opportunities arise. And I thank you for your time commitment to this effort and that it even got up for public vote. And if there's more questions that we can help with over time, I would be more than willing and with our organization to help with. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider ordinance 1234, approving the proposed zoning code amendments, chapter 17.44.01, procedures for applications for rezoning real estate. This is the first reading.
I would move for the first reading of ordinance 1, 2, 3, 4.
I guess I have a quick question for the city attorney. How did the state code read before? Did it simply say I'm a supermajority, or how did that?
You know, I looked really hard at this, and I found something from a prior, it wasn't even necessarily zoning, it was like a development board, and this goes back like 40 years or more. The only thing I can gather is that when most cities adopted their zoning, they just adopted that language that was a holdover from when, I'd have to pull it back out, but basically, it was a 3/4 majority, whatever we have right now, for changing zoning, and that, I think that changed in the early 70s. And actually, that entire chapter of the code, if I remember right, went away, and we developed an entirely new zoning code for the state of Iowa. There was 3/4.
I guess my other question is, how many other communities are?
Do we have a motion? Do we need
I'm
to?
sorry,
No,
it wasn't seconded yet.
No, it wasn't seconded yet, but, pardon? We just have a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, no, thank you.
Looking at what other communities are doing, maybe Chad, could you answer that, or do you have any knowledge as to communities similar size or any issues that you've heard of, other communities changing their?
No, other than just the usual conversations whether a property gets zoned or not and why. I haven't seen anything out of the norm compared to our code. John had actually done a little research and came upon a code example, I think, that had tied the council's reaction to P and Z based on a percentage or a ratio of how P and Z might have approved or denied, impacted the number of votes required at the council level. That's kind of out there a little bit, I think, in terms of the norm, but otherwise, I think ours is pretty status quo.
I looked at several different cities, and where usually there was one where it wasn't in their code at all. It was a recommendation went to the city council. Some of the other ones had the same thing that we did, but actually stated ultimately in the end, it's the city council decision as far as what the vote should be. So it was kind of all over the board as well. I went through the ones that we usually look at to see when we're comparing salaries and whatever. I think for me, I started out with nothing because it wasn't even supposed to be anything. As far as not having anything as far as what's coming because it's a recommendation. But then I also, went through the process and realized the importance of the planning and zoning. So then I went up to the 4-3. But then when I went to the planning and zoning and talked, I was comfortable with what they said at 5-2 because I think that makes it a little more, but not quite to the 6 one. So I was comfortable with what planning and zoning had proposed to the city council, and I believe that Chad recommended approval of 5-2 as well in his background notes.
So I would again state my objection to this proposed zoning change. I will not be voting in favor, and I encourage all of you to join me in that. As I previously stated, this feels like a fix to a non-problem. To date, no, just one example, a non-example in my opinion, because the vote never came to our council table, so we don't know what the results would have been, has been presented as the impetus for this change. And it's irresponsible to make a change based on one situation. Our decisions and our votes here will impact Decorah for years to come, and I think we need to be aware of that. In addition to the things I stated earlier, this job is pretty intense, and y'all don't get paid very much. And we have full-time jobs and full-time families and full-time responsibilities. And in defense of future council people, I do not feel comfortable removing any of the recommendation, authority, responsibilities of our appointed commissions. We appoint those citizens who give time that they are also volunteering to our city, and I think we should respect them. That our role in appointing them is an extension of our responsibility, and while we should never cast votes here without reading our material and doing our homework and due diligence, we do not have time to take on preliminary responsibilities that P&Z do for us. They meet at meetings that we do not have time to attend. They have discussions with developers and folks in our communities that we do not have time to do. And I think we do a disservice to future councils to remove any of the authority and the recommendations that they bring to us.
I appreciate Johanna's comments. She and I have talked at other workshops as well. My reply as far as a non-issue is that was the biggest issue that I would have heard as far, even though it didn't come to the city council because of the 6-1, I had many people in the community that asked me, actually they learned a lot about planning and zoning and city council, and they asked why wasn't it the elected officials that would be voting on that, and why was it so stringent? I've heard other people say they feel that the 5-2 is adequate. I also believe that no matter what comes before this commission, you can't solely, you have to look at any commission reports that come to us. You have to trust that, of course, they're doing their work, But I also think it's the responsibility of each city council person that sits at this table to look closely at what's brought forth and to be able to have a fair sense of what they can vote on when they're doing, I was like, fortunately, I respect Johanna, I just respectfully disagree as to where she's coming from, and I feel entitled to exactly.
I think one other comment or something to consider that Chad made, because initially I was okay with the 5-2 until our work session where I heard Johanna and Steve's position related to petitioners being able to require a 6-1 vote and how this would change that. But a comment that Chad made as well was, property rights are serious issues, and people make decisions based on existing zoning. And when something is changed, that's going to affect more than just the entity that's looking for that change. It's going to make changes to those that are surrounding it as well. And so you have to take it very seriously, which is probably why it was set up. When there is a denial to change, in order to overturn it, it is pretty stringent to do that. And I think there's good reason. And so after hearing comments from Chad on that and Steve and Johanna, I agree. And then to the point of being a non-issue, I was like, okay, so how often has zoning requests been denied? And I asked Chad just to do it since his time being here. Since 2011, there are 16 requests. 15 of them were approved, and one of them was denied. And that one that was denied never even came to the city council. So I agree with Johanna that I believe this is a non-issue, and I think it is reactionary. And if it's simply related to the Menards issue and the floodplain issue, then I feel like there's other approaches that should be taken in order to deal with that issue.
I agree with that piece. My question would be, even if, it would still be a 5-2 vote, you'd still would have to reach 5 city council members?
I understand.
Okay.
I served on P&Z for many years prior to joining the council, and this is a tough one. I completely agree with the property right issue, the severity of the issue. But looking at the council and just what we talk about, it's very hard to achieve a supermajority on anything. And going back to Mr. Dimow's comment, we're elected officials. P&Z is not. P&Z gets the luxury of operating in an ideal world, in an absolute world, and has to. So does, Board of Adjustment, not as much. But I would be in support of the 5-2 change, not the 4-3, because of the 5 wards. We do represent the public, and we represent the great world. We have to look at the economic impact as well as the physical impact, as well as the people who may not qualify for that, the 20 people who try to petition, right? So I think the 5-2 is strong enough to represent the will of the people. I don't appreciate necessarily the way that it was brought up. I think there are some process things that we could do better through longer range visioning. But since it's on the table, I'm in support of 5-2.
I just want to I'll just go on record here. You know, the 5.2, it's not a big difference from the 6.1, but it does give us a little bit more room. Because occasionally there are, instead of, people get emotional about things, and we've even had that happen at the council level in my time on the council, where people voted against proposal or a development, even though they were legally permitted to do what they were doing. And one of the council people afterwards even said, should have voted for it, but I just didn't like it. So this gives us a little bit more room, because I'm not going to speak for anybody on the P&Z. I don't know what they were thinking, what their thoughts were, just reading through the minutes. If you looked at the facts and what was there, presented by the DNR, the Corps, the flood study being done, everything looked like it was in order on this particular issue. Now, I'll turn down the line here for in the future. You know, there's, would another spot in town have been great? Absolutely. Nobody's going to deny that. But, you know, we could have had this. So,
I would have a little additional information going back to what Mr. Mason said too. I mean, there's still one more board that's going to have to weigh in on this development project, and that is the Board of Adjustment. And they weren't, just like us, we did not have a vote because it was pulled off the table. Board of Adjustment is still going to have to vote on that, and we have no idea what they're doing. And so I think, you know, it's a pretty steep hill to climb to get anything rezoned in this fashion. You've got Board of Adjustment and Planning and Zone Commission and the City Council plan. But unfortunately, our code doesn't direct petitioners where to go first. And maybe that's a change that we need to make too, is to make it the same every time around. A developer can't choose to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission first or to the Board of Adjustment. I mean, we need to decide what is the proper procedure in this case. In any case. But and maybe that's another rule change that needs to be discussed before another petition comes out.
Any other comments?
Kirk, just picking up on your thread, I totally agree. I think there are things we could do in Decorah to make development a little bit easier. I'm just confused about why this is the question in front of us, when we're not talking about I mean, we will be very shortly in our meeting, talking about clarifying the comprehensive plan, which I would propose, following Chad's recommendation, to do a complete rework in the next few years, and at the same time looking at zoning throughout to say, how can we be a friendlier city? How can that process be easy to read? To me, this is not the appropriate place to start.
That was my point as well, so we're in agreement, just coming at it from different.
Okay, any other discussion?
Yes. The decision to seek the change of the zoning ordinance was not suggested by Planning and Zoning. No one on the Planning and Zoning Commission felt a need to rewrite this ordinance. It was an autocratic decision reached by one person who decided to ask the city attorney to research the ordinance. They wanted it rewritten to say that only a simple majority of the council was needed to overturn a planning and zoning decision to reject a request for a zoning change. That reading sought to downplay the authority and responsibility of the city's Planning and Zoning Commission. When that plan was presented to P&Z, the response was disbelief. I believe the quote was, "Why do we even have a commission if our work can be so easily set aside?" I feel that this slight of a hardworking city commission could have been avoided if others had been consulted in a democratic discussion on this ordinance. The initially proposed ordinance change, allowing a simple majority of the council to overrule a P&Z decision not to allow a request to zoning change, was not acceptable to the Planning and Zoning Commission. 100% of the persons speaking at the public hearing for P&Z spoke against this ordinance. The minutes of the April P&Z meeting also state that one member cautioned the city council that they may get more than they might be considering if this change in code comes through. If there had been a full discussion of this topic, the officials seeking this change might have heard several insightful questions and observations. For example, there is no data showing that something needs to be fixed. There's only been one requested zoning change that has been denied in the rememberable past. How does changing a city ordinance for one instance, an exception, make sense? Why is the exception a reasonable rationale to write a new law? This suggested change is trying to fix a non-problem. The current ordinance is okay as written. There are significant ways to positively impact economic development that don't take into account the need to distrust a commission of the city that's charged with the significant work of protecting the city property owners' rights. If the economic development of our community is only possible by more easily overriding a rejected zoning change, something is amiss or even wrong. I would suggest it's more important to understand the reasons the Planning and Zoning Commission denied a rezoning request. Making it easier to overturn their work doesn't provide such needed insight. According to the Decorah Journal, May 2nd, the person seeking to change the ordinance thinks this rewrite would address what happened in the past and prevent future roadblocks. What are the ways this rewritten ordinance addresses past decisions? Why is the current ordinance seen as a roadblock to future economic development? These questions have not been addressed. For me to support this rewrite, these questions need to be answered. Planning and Zoning Commission acts as an advisory body to this elected body. It applies the policies set out in the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinances by making recommendations on specific project applications. They are not charged with making decisions that more easily secure economic development. State law mandates, and therefore the current ordinance is, that if citizens around a requested zoning change petition against the change, then it takes a 6 of 7 vote by City Council to override the petition. There are 9 different properties within 200 feet of the property that Menards had sought to have rezoned. If 20% of them, 2 of them, had petitions to not have the property rezoned, then the City Council would have needed 6 of 7 to overturn the property owner's petition. That section of the ordinance cannot be changed as it reflects state law of Ohio. My sentiment is that the Planning and Zoning Commission should be recognized for their work, and if they reject a zoning request, they should have no weaker stance than the 20% of the property owners within 200 feet of the proposed rezone. I would encourage the council to reject the first reading of this ordinance.
In response to a bit of what you said, which I appreciated, your thoughtful presentation for that, and understand where you're coming from. I was not something that I pulled out of my hat to try and look into. I had enough citizens at that time that asked me what started or why was it that the city council did not have enough vote. I started back in January with that research. It said right away that I was looking into it. I believe I said it at city council meetings. It came forth after I had worked with John and presented information. There has been discussions on it. I attempted to do a process by what I felt was being requested from citizens of the community as far as what was an ordinance that could be looked at. We had a workshop on it, we discussed it there. I had no intent to negate what the Planning and Zoning Commission has to do. There were 3 people at the Planning and Zoning public hearing, and obviously there was 100% in favor of not supporting it. The Planning and Zoning Committee did discuss it, and their choice was to, there were members on the committee that felt that a 6-to-1 vote was too strong. They also stated that a 4-to-3 was too weak, and thus they voted for the 5-to-2. Now, in order to maybe figure out how you do go about changing, that would be worth looking at, but I did have enough people in the community that asked me on it, that I looked into. And to be quite frank, I figured there was something that would be backed up for that 6-to-1 through the state code, and there was not. And so I continued. Any other comments? Roll call.
Motion by Chisholm, second by Johnson. Chisholm?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
No.
Bell Richard?
No.
Carlson?
Aye.
Luce? No.
Thank you for your precious input on this. That's, we will have this again for the second reading at the next city council meeting. Resolution 2959, a resolution of acceptance of final plat of City Estates, 14th edition.
So you have a final plat for Cedar View Estates, 14th edition. There are 7 lots in this subdivision, all conforming to the R3 multifamily residential zoning. The Planning and Zoning Commission has approved a recommendation to approve this final plat for the 14th edition subdivision.
Just to confirm, sidewalks have been discussed.
Sidewalks have been discussed and are in the preliminary plat for this subdivision.
You did ask.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Motion by Chisholm, second by Carlson. Chisholm?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Aye.
Bergen?
Aye.
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Consider Resolution 2960, a resolution setting a public hearing on zoning code amendments 2012 and comprehensive plan amendment.
The Planning and Zoning Commission's engaged in a review of the comprehensive plan. The city's current comprehensive plan was studied, updated, and reviewed in circa 2010, 2011. It was adopted by the city council in, I believe, January or February of 2012. This amendment, the Planning and Zoning Commission, was an attempt to keep the comprehensive plan fresh and relevant, unlike the previous one, which was adopted in 1993 and rarely used or looked at. And then there became a point when it was so old that it was not even really relevant anymore. The Planning and Zoning Commission vowed to not let that happen with this version. So in an attempt to keep it fresh and relevant, they looked at updates in data, language, forecasts, some planning and zoning related targets were amended, in review of demographic data comprising the prevalent substance of the update today. There is a background sheet in the council packet of the areas that the Planning and Zoning Commission looked at. I'm not going to read all through that document. The council here has had it for a while. But just to kind of touch on each of the chapters. Chapter 1, which are the key issues and opportunities. This section mostly reviewed population projections, which were grossly out of whack. Projecting Decorah's population at well over 15,000 by the year 2020. We have a ways to go in a short period of time. Some new maps were added, others modified or removed. Chapter 2 on housing. Key elements in this chapter included updating housing data, including building permit, data for the years 2012 through 2015. Some charts, tables, and updated growth data were removed as the methodology was not tracking, as I kind of mentioned. Several additional housing resources were added through 2017. Chapter 3, transportation, traffic count data is added to reflect the latest 2017 DOT data. New and improved bike and pedestrian maps were added. Additional and expanded discussion was added to reflect the community's interest in parking. Chapter 4, utilities and community facilities. Information was added to reflect Luther's continued growth in renewable energy. Additional information was added to reflect the recent completion of the city's headwork study at the wastewater treatment plant in July of 2016. This information gives a general overview of the plant's loading capacities and ability to support new industry in the community. Updated mapping, water and sewer infrastructure was added, and updated programs for local source water protection, links to relevant sites including our rural water, the EPA, and the Iowa DNR were updated. Information was added noting the telecommunications feasibility studies and the community's desire to seek information on designing and building a public fiber to the premise network. Information on the Metronet was updated. Updates to local public safety data was added. Some bio for named and memorial parks was added. Chapter 5, natural, agricultural, and cultural resources were updated, especially links to many of our sites and organizations. The Upper Iowa Watershed Management Authority information was added, and information was added about the stormwater management utility, which was created in 2016. Chapter 6, hazards, levy accreditation information was updated along with additional dates and information relative to the new firm maps from FEMA. Complete change in information related to the 2015 hazard mitigation plan. The previous plan was approved at the county level in 2011, so there's information there for the current revision. Chapter 7, economic development, information for community education and economies were updated. City budget information was updated. A lot of the general budget information was removed and just referenced city audits or city budgets as relevant rather than listing all of that information out. Chapter 8, intergovernmental cooperation, general narrative updates. Chapter 9, land use, there were no changes to the land use mapping. Chapter 10 is a section on implementation then of the various tenants, and you can see a list of some of the changes there. So the Planning and Zoning Commission, again, wanted to keep this document fresh, lively, and relevant. We talked then at their final public hearing and approval that the commission would like to look at a full revision at about the 10 to 15 year mark, so that's coming up in just a couple of years. So, but they're
2020, I think.
yeah, 2022 would be the 10-year mark. So, so this information, because it's zoning related, does require a public hearing of the city council. So that's the action in front of you tonight.
So I'd like to say thank you to the Planning and Zoning Commission for many, many months of work and for Chad for carefully, judiciously stewarding this forward. I'd also propose to my fellow council members that while I read the comprehensive plan in markup while at the Planning and Zoning meetings that I attended, I don't feel like I did due diligence to the final copy this weekend. And I would suggest that we buy ourselves 2 weeks for a full review. If anyone considers that they might have a recommendation for an additional input or that would be added, we would need to do that prior to holding the public hearing. And I would suggest that we do that on June 3rd.
I also was not able to read the 106 pages. I didn't have time to search it. It's probably not a bad call.
So you're recommending then that the public hearing go to June 17th?
Yeah, so just, I'd love to see this same agenda item on our June 3rd meeting, during which we can set June 17th public hearing.
Okay. So don't take any
So
action.
you're making a motion to table
Oh, it's so complicated.
I was just gonna say.
Yes, I'm gonna make a motion
Think
to
you have to do
table
something in
until
between.
June 3rd.
Okay,
Table
so-
the resolution tonight.
Okay,
Why
now
can't you
did
just
we,
set it for
do we,
June 17th?
we have a
Could
motion?
you- yeah, you
Did
could
we
do
have a
that.
motion and a second?
I don't know.
You
Oh,
do, Bergen.
one of
Okay,
Bergen
so,
and Carlton.
okay.
So one, yeah, to table it, right? So one of the point is you could just set the public hearing tonight for June 17th, which was,
Oh,
that was my first ask too, right? So,
sorry, yeah, okay, I can amend, will you accept the amendment? Okay, I have moved to table the discussion to June 3rd and set the public hearing for the comp plan on June 17th.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm sorry, who seconded that? Dan, still, Andy?
And
Dan,
That's
Dan,
within
you know,
the reasonable way of doing stuff. Okay, roll call.
Okay, so before I take that, is
Yes.
there, at least at this initial review, is there anything else that you'd like to see? I mean, I created this overview chapter by chapter of all the comments and notes from the commission, but is there additional information?
Did one of, at the department, did somebody ask about Airbnbs? If that was- there was any-
Yeah, that's, I mean, there could be some language in the housing section, I think, but otherwise that's really probably more a technical, let's look at the zoning code type conversation. Right?
And what date is that set at?
So June 3rd will be discussion, June 17th will be the hearing.
Okay.
Chad, just for clarification on the background that you provided us, the yellow highlights with questions, are those addressed in the comp plan?
They are all, except I'm still needing some numbers on the homeschool
Okay, great.
attendance. So
Okay.
that would be the one piece I still need.
Okay. Roll call.
Bergen,
Aye.
Bell Richard,
Aye.
Carlson.
Aye.
Luce. Johnson. Hadley.
Aye.
Chisholm.
Thank you. Consider a professional services agreement with Kaler Consulting LLC for police chief recruiting process for a not to exceed $18,500. Might you give background on that, please, Jim?
So a little bit of background coming out of the last council work session. I did do some research on references, talking to other city managers, and some other consultants regarding the two consultants that I presented to the council at that time. One of them was Jeff Kaler Consulting, and the other Mulder and Associates. Based on my recommendations and some conversations with Chief Nixon as well, staff recommendation is for Kaler Consulting at a not to exceed $13,500 to manage really all of the program, including assessments and interviews, to that $13,000. We think it'll be less than that, but obviously the entire program at that amount. But then interjecting staff assistance, time, writing, wherever we can to help with the process, reduce costs, be more efficient.
So actually, it could be an a la carte setup.
Yeah, you said whatever you guys do, you wouldn't bill us for, right?
I know that Kurt from personnel and Steve from public safety, Wanda, Chad, and I sat and talked about possibility of forming a smaller committee to work with this. They can speak to that as well. I know the one comment they said is to have someone in the police force that's maybe outside, like, and I know Waverly was recommended. I had a potential of somebody, perhaps, if that's the way you wanted to go, from the public to work on a committee, just to work with this too, but, either you, Kirk, or Stephen, any comment on discussions or not, or any other city council person have any thoughts on it?
I'll motion to approve the professional service agreement with Kaler Consulting not to exceed $13,500.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bell Richard,
Aye.
Bergen,
Aye.
Chisholm, Carlson,
No.
Luce. Johnson. Hadley.
Aye.
What kind of direction might you need, Chad?
So the first thing we'll start getting out tomorrow is a department assessment. Mr. Kaler has an assessment sheet that he'll want some key individuals to fill out. I think we'll get it to just providing some background and some input on the condition of the department today. That'll be the first step, so we'll try to get that out tomorrow.
I would love clarification about the small group that was proposed, if we anticipate any action on that.
So really, I think what the mayor is referring to is an interview committee. Okay? And we'll seek Jeff's guidance on how we formulate that and what that's the process.
And at the April work session, we had discussed having a personnel committee to review job descriptions. Is that soon on your process?
Yeah, I've already had some staff folks starting to look at that. I don't think, Kirk, I don't even think I got that to you yet, so we'll get that going to as part of the process.
Anything else you need?
I guess I would just like to encourage transparency in the process and communication, just generally
Okay.
across the council. So when we're asked by the community about what the status is or what steps were taken and why they were taken, that we can answer and tell them.
Okay. Very good.
I think the work session discussion about this process and feeling assured that we have professionals on our current force, but wanting to make sure that we're doing due diligence to find the best possible situation. So it's not at all to demean any of our current officers who might apply for this position. It's simply doing due diligence.
Okay, consider appointments to boards and commissions. Do you want to make comments on that, Chad, or do you want to just? Okay, Airport Commission, Rick Hadley. Tree Board, Brent Parker.
I motion to approve Rick Hadley to the Airport Commission. Can I do both? I know at one point we decided not to do that at the same time. And I'll motion to approve Rick Hadley. Second.
Any discussion?
I'm gonna not vote.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Mr. Hadley does not live in the city, and we already have a non-resident on the airport commission?
We were informed today that it was voted on that you could have two, wasn't that correct?
You can have up to 2 non-residents on the airport commission by code.
But the other information was that perhaps there's one that is going to be moved, that is on the airport.
He's moved back into town.
Back into town.
I thought we changed that to one.
Okay, roll call?
Bell Richard?
Aye.
Carlson?
Aye.
Luce?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
Hadley?
Not voting.
Bergen? Chisholm?
Okay. All right, department heads.
Might not seem like summer, but the pool is opening on Sunday, this coming Sunday, May 26th. So we have staff training on Saturday, and we'll be ready to go on Sunday, weather permitting. Until school gets out, it is a little bit of a limited schedule. We'll be open on weekends and after school in the evenings until starting, I guess, June 8th, we'll get on to our regular schedule of school out. So.
If the council can,
We'll just get down.
yes, if the council can remember during budget times, you had done some geo bonding to tackle some projects in the city that weren't neglected, but just the funding wasn't there to do them. And part of that funding was the inspection and maintenance to our water towers and reservoirs. We have since the Luther College Reservoir has been cleaned and inspected and had a raving review since the last time it was had any maintenance done to it, so that's a very good sign.
We took the industrial park tower offline last week, which Chad stated earlier was constructed in 2008 or 9. And that is being repainted because some of the original paint did not stick and the primer has been showing, so that has been taken offline. They're in the process of cleaning it now. They're gonna do an inspection and painting of that. The Ronan's North Tank, which was our original first tank in the city of Decorah, which was late 1800s, is on schedule to be taken out of service and cleaned, inspected, and any maintenance done in June. And we're waiting to hear about the Locust Road Tower, which also will be taken offline, cleaned, inspected, and everything else. So hopefully, after the summer is over, we'll have a baseline of, we can get the general maintenance done on these towers every 5 to 7 years, like the DNR would like to have us done. So very much appreciated for that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that in-house or is that a hire?
It's a hire out.
Thank you.
Jeremy?
We are in the middle of our giveaways out at the Yard Waste site. We've had 3 days and loaded up 275 trailers, trucks, etc. So it's been successful, but we have plenty left. So we're going to do one more Saturday. This Saturday from 8 to noon, we'll have a loader out there. Come get some wood chips or compost. It's been well received so far.
Much appreciated.
Hopefully the weather will cooperate this one.
It was rainy on Saturday, so that's 75 people.
Nothing at this time here.
Randy?
Nothing this evening.
Dan?
We have an economic development property committee meeting directly following this.
Randy?
Try and schedule a utility meeting if we don't have any other meetings scheduled for after our next meeting on the 3rd. Immediately following the meeting.
Steve?
Was privileged to go to the Rural Economic Development Summit in Grinnell a couple weeks ago. And one of the things we heard there was in the question of, does your city council have a housing committee? As part of the perspective of looking at what your city needs are, to actually elevate that need to a committee level, whether it's like Dan's with property added on to, or what it is, but to actually be diligently thinking about what are your housing needs and putting that forward. The other thing is, I don't know if you have the dates for, in June, the Sustainability Committee has going to be scheduling a couple of different sessions for community members to come to this building, this room, and give their input into building a stronger,
Better.
better Decorah. Do you know those dates? I don't remember.
I don't have it in front of me.
Thank you. Yolanda?
I have an announcement from my daughter, Margaret, who is, as per coach's 11-year-old. She would like to invite everyone to Dandelion Fest this Sunday at 2 p.m. in Phelps Park. This is a celebration of a small yellow flower that has been misnamed a weed by too many, and she and her friends hope you will join the celebration. The fest is an event that they dreamt up last June and have been scheming about ever since. There's a little over a dozen girls involved from the Decorah community, and they'd really like to see it.
And what time is it?
2 to 5.
2 to 5, thank you. Russ?
I also went to the Economic Development Conference in Grinnell, and not to just go on a political tirade, but we often, from a forward-facing, visible Decorah, we seem like we're divided. We fight about everything, and getting consensus is very hard. It's good to leave the valley, because we told people we were from Decorah, and they were like, we love Decorah. You're so lucky. We heard about all the things that are going on for Iowa economic development, and we're doing most of it. We're doing so many things right that the small things that we're doing wrong, we have to remember our tweaks, you know? And we just need to take a step back and breathe and all be thankful for where we live and try to find some way to find cohesion. And not just be involved in endless debates all the time. And I don't know how we're gonna do that. Obviously, it's a political thing, and we're pretty well split, but today, I have spent literally 7 hours talking to constituents. And we have full-time jobs, and my kids graduating, and, you know, it's a lot. So, call us, talk to us, if you have issues, reach out, but just be thankful.
Alex?
Yeah, so this week up at Luther is finals week, so the school year is coming to a close very quickly. Commencement this weekend, Symphony Orchestra and Nordic Choir have their spring showcase concert on Friday at 7:30 in the CFL. Otherwise, this is my last meeting. I'll be graduating on Sunday.
Congratulations. Wherever you go, you find a council that you can sit at. I have two things. One, I've attended one session for the Bruning edition, which was last Thursday night, and there's another one tomorrow night. I would encourage anybody to come at those. It's, there's a lot of comments. There'll be a lot of public comments coming forth, and it's good to know what's going on with that. The second thing is I do believe in the budget that there are funds for visioning, and we have talked about working with and heard comments as far as attempting to work with a visioning of sorts, a training session, whatever. And that would be worthy to bring forth and see what, you know, you've heard, had some speakers that might be, but if we could talk more about that and set up a time when we could actually be doing some of that. So, I have a motion to adjourn.